Hello. Hello, everybody. It's so nice to see all your faces. Hello and welcome. We keep going with these virtual visiting artist lecture series that we started in the fall of 2020. This is the first lecture of 2023, although not the first in this school year. Today, I'm especially excited to have the pleasure of a lecture by Julia Henexius. I'm Amanda Knowles, the coordinator of the NSC Art Gallery and printmaking and drawing instructor in the art department at North Seattle College. I am pleased to work with Desiree Beadle, who is assisting in the gallery. Desiree is assisting behind the scenes here today. There is a good team that supports the NSC Art Gallery with their work, and I really appreciate the whole team. You know who you are. I want to tell you early on that we have live transcript available for those of you who want it. Those of you who don't want it or find it distracting can turn it off by clicking. I think you might have to turn it on by clicking the live transcript button, and then you can also hide captions down at the bottom as well. Use it if you wish, hide it if you wish, but we want to make sure that we have it for those that need it. So it is there. First, some acknowledgements, and I will share my screen. We'll start with a land acknowledgement. So first is the land acknowledgement. North Seattle College acknowledges that we occupy the lands of the Coast Salish peoples, the descendants of the first peoples of this region, a people whose cultures endure and are valued. Without this land and these cultures, we would not have access to this gathering, dialogue, and learning space. We take this moment to honor and thank the original caretakers of this land, their ancestors, and their descendants who are still here. We encourage participants here today to consider our responsibilities as we stand in solidarity with the sovereignty, cultural heritage, and lives of Native, Indigenous, and First Nations peoples. And then a labor acknowledgement. We also pause to recognize and acknowledge the labor that created the United States and from which we all benefit. We remember that our nation is built on the labor of enslaved people who were forcibly brought to the US from the African continent, and we recognize the continued contribution of their survivors. We acknowledge immigrant labor and recognize that voluntary forced and prison labor contribute to the building and ongoing maintenance of our nation. We acknowledge all unpaid caregiving labor. Additionally, we acknowledge the critical importance of the work towards racial equity that continues across this country in response to racial injustice and generations of structural racism against BIPOC communities. And then this next slide shows what we're doing as we continue to work to go from acknowledgement to deed. We know that it is not enough to just acknowledge the land and labor and have to be sure that we are taking action. We show you here what actions North Seattle College and the NSC Art Department are taking to support BIPOC individuals and institutions and to be held accountable. We recommend Real Rent Duwamish, and we will put that link in the chat for you all to explore. Thank you. I mentioned here quickly that to support our college community, there will be a supported healing and mindfulness listening space on Zoom on Friday from 1 to 2 to acknowledge the pain and grief around recent events of violence and hate that are taking a toll on communities, especially communities of color. Please look for information on this event. The current show in the NSC Art Gallery is an exhibition entitled Ideas of Home. It is a strong show of exceptional artists with diverse viewpoints on the matter of home. The gallery is open Monday through Thursday, 11 to 5 p.m. and Fridays, 11 to 2 p.m. through the end of the show, which ends on March 3rd, 2023. Campus parking enforcement is back, so when you come to campus, please be sure to pay attention and pay for parking if needed. I believe that the visitor parking along College Way, you can pay for shorter amounts of time. We will also continue to have virtual visiting artist lectures. On Monday, February 27th, 2023, we will hear from artist Lauren Aida, who is an artist and the co-founder of Open Studio Cambodia, an artist collective based in Siem Reap, Cambodia, which supports emerging Cambodian contemporary artists. Please keep checking in with the gallery on Facebook, Instagram, and our website to find out who will be talking and when. We urge you to visit our website for links to recordings of all the talks to date as well as the list of upcoming visiting artists. We will post our links in the chat, and you can sign up for emails by contacting us at nscartgallery@seattlecolleges.edu if you want things directly from us. Thank you. With that, it is finally time to introduce our visiting artist, Julia Hynexius. It is such a pleasure to have Julia here with us today. She received her Bachelor of Fine Arts degree in metals from the University of Washington, where she also received a minor in medical history and ethics. She received her Master of Fine Arts degree in metals from Cranbrook Academy of Art in Michigan. Julia is a full-time jewelry instructor and North Seattle College Art Department's newest hire. She came to us this fall from the Evergreen State College, where for 5 years she was a full-time undergraduate instructor in 3D art, design, drawing, and prototyping, specializing in jewelry and fine metal. Julia is a working artist who has participated in many exhibitions, both international and national. She was a Soil Gallery member. Julia has held residencies at the Vermont Studio Center, the Smitten Forum residency at the Mendocino Art Center, and was a Collins Foundation artist in residence at Oregon College of Art and Craft. She has also done a lot of curating. Julia has assisted fabulous artists in their work, such as Iris Eckenberg, John Grade, Trish Marham, Lori Talcott, and Janet Brevik. She is an intelligent and fabulous colleague who offers wonderful perspective to the department. I will hand you over to Julia, but before I do, I want to let the audience know that we will be taking questions in the chat today. So if questions or comments arise during the talk, please write them in the chat and we will hopefully get to all of them. As usual, we will be sending a transcript of the chat to Julia after the talk. So if you want to comment on the work and her words, please do, but you might find yourself being specific about what you are commenting on, as she will see your words after the talk. But I urge you to support her ideas, and her work in the chat. Welcome, Julia.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you so much. And thanks to all of you who made it here today. I'm very happy and pleased to see so many familiar names in the in my view screen. It looks like there's even members of my family here, which I did my best to not let them know that this is what I was doing today. So I don't know how they snuck in, but I'm very pleased to see all of you, and I can't wait to read the chat afterwards. I am not going to be able to pay attention to it during the actual presentation because I need all the focus I can muster during this presentation. So yeah, but I want to start out by saying thank you all so much. I am pretty lucky to be here at North. I am really excited to be teaching in jewelry and fine metal smithing. I feel like to become a teacher is both something that you can work towards and grow towards, but it's also really, it's a lucky thing if it's something that you end up being able to do for a little bit of your life. So yeah, thanks to North, and thanks to all the people that helped me become a teacher and continue to teach. So that would include my wonderful family members. It's my mom's birthday today. My mom is a teacher. My dad is a teacher. I'm surrounded by people who care about communication, who care about showing people how to get better at doing things, people who want to spread autonomy so that we can all take care of ourselves and others. So all of you, I thank you so much. And Amanda mentioned that I'm a new hire here, and I just recently came from the Evergreen State College. That is also an amazing community like North. Lots of collaboration, and I'm also very, very thankful for all my teaching partners at Evergreen. I wouldn't be the teacher I am today without them, and the people that I'm working with at North now are also already helping me grow in new ways. So really glad to be here. nervous and excited to talk about a couple of projects. And we're going to start. I'm going to start by sharing a video, and we tested this before, so hopefully this will work out. The video that I'm sharing is a collection of images. There's no audio. It's a collection of images, video shot during the summer before last, when I was able to work with the benefit of a grant on capturing some views of hands working with materials in ways that are familiar and then specific also to craft medium or the metal studio. I'll talk a little bit about this after I show the video, but one of my primary goals with capturing some of these videos and constructing this sort of like side-by-side comparison of working with everyday materials and everyday actions and working with tools and mediums in craft studios was to highlight the degree to which we all have embedded transferable knowledge that we take from our lives and our home experiences into the studio. So kind of breaking down the idea that what we do when we step into a metal studio or another craft studio is wholly unknown to us, but that it is something that is related to things that we have done before with our hands and with our understanding of the material world. So the runtime, I think, is about 3 minutes, and I'll share my screen. And again, there's no audio. All right. So that particular set of images was captured after working for at least a year or a year and a half, teaching under the restrictions of COVID. During the transition from in-studio work to online work, in studios that are so heavily based in working in person and working by hand. Like a lot of teachers, I think I tried to pivot very quickly to replicating ways of doing things that we would do in the studio to represent them through video, through images, and try to teach in a way that was step-by-step and attainable within this sort of like very crazy moment where we needed to engage with materials, but could only do it in community through screens and through video tutorials. So I'm going to share a couple of slides now, a couple of images to talk a little bit about what it was that I was trying to do initially during COVID, and how that then contrasted with the things that I started thinking about once I was later on starting to produce the video that I just showed. So one moment while I share my screen. So initially, when I was trying to keep doing things with metalsmithing and with students during COVID, I would produce a lot of these like sort of step-by-step tutorials. And then if we were lucky, we'd have the opportunity to work together in person and do some outdoor activities. So one of the classes that I taught in the couple of years that we were teaching during COVID, we are still teaching during COVID, I should say. The fact that I have the ability to proceed and return back to the studio is something that I'm very grateful for. We are still wearing masks in the studio. We're still trying to keep each other healthy. Health and our relationship to health really affects the way that we're able to make art. But I suppose what I mean by the early days of teaching in COVID is that real complete removal from the studio and how to sort of negotiate making work. And so initially I was doing these very step-by-step tutorials to prepare students for something that we might be doing in person. And so I was communicating things like process and safety and outcomes and all of these sorts of things. And so I'd be producing things like slideshows about sand casting, and sometimes it would take so long to kind of do these setups that I'd be doing it after dark. So trying to maintain a sense of humor. These were a couple of images from one setup where I was instructing students, setting them up for a in-person daytime sand casting experience where we were going to work outside to cast weights that would later be used for a type of tool called the Secchi disc, which is a marine biology tool. I was teaching with Gerardo Chinleo, who's a marine biology teacher at the Evergreen State College. And so we were combining metalsmithing, sand casting, and then attaching it to a particular type of tool that measures the clarity and relationship to depth of water. So I was taking a lot of inspiration in these tutorials from all of the amazing work that was being done on YouTube. I became kind of a YouTube junkie, and in that process of sort of making and experiencing proficiency in this compressed, when someone is really good at being a YouTube content producer, you get this sort of like this compressed time and joy of making without always any of the long, drawn out, fraught experiences of making mistakes and trying to figure things out, and there being sort of hang time, time when you don't really know what you're doing next, or you're waiting for something to happen. And so this juicy experience of watching people do things, watching people make things on YouTube or in other video content arenas. Initially, I was very inspired by it. And then as I continued to miss the studio more and more, I sort of started to reconsider my relationship to this experience of making through seeing other people make. It was causing this, I think, in my own practice and my own work, and then also the work of creation that I was encouraging my students to experience, and working side by side with my students, this comparison of how things should work step by step in a perfect arena was becoming increasingly out of sync with our actual experience, actual lives, which were and are incredibly messy, continually disrupted, and not cleanly edited. So this led me to the creation of that particular video, which I shared. And then just one second, I'm going to show another slide, another scene that relates back to this idea. Okay. So, all right, we'll start on some slides. And so I think I'm going to go for about the next 15 minutes, show you some work, show you some slides, loop back around to this YouTube experience, this experience of making through video, this experience of an incredibly physical making life that all of a sudden is increasingly experienced digitally. And then hopefully there'll be some time left for questions at the very end. Okay, so I can't read the chat. I'm not going to read the chat at the moment, but I'm starting here in relationship to this image, and this is a little bit of a joke. If anybody clicked their screen, hoping that they would, if anybody's watching this on their phone and click their screen, hoping that they would get the presentation in desktop mode, that isn't a reality. That isn't something that I've not made two presentations that you will see in two different modes. I can turn my photo sideways for you, but the sort of infinitely moldable and mutable digital experience where everything is designed in order to make it incredibly easy for us to alter images, zoom in on images, see the things that we're looking at in the most hyper optimized format. That isn't something that is going to be available to you in this particular presentation. This is going to be not the sparkly YouTube, not the well-edited magic of television, start to finish. These are all the steps. Essentially, this experience that I'm offering you, these thoughts and some of my past works are not tidy. They are not kitted out. They are not step by step. When I was thinking about what I would want to speak with you all about today, this idea kept coming up about kits and also about algorithms and robots. Robots are in the news a lot lately. Chat robots, artist art producing robots. People have been figuring out pretty amazing ways of creating machines that can get really creative and do creative recombinations of knowledge and of images in a way that is starting to fool people on a whole new level. So when I was thinking about this experience of seeing videos, this experience of YouTube, watching people create on YouTube, the feeling that I could be experiencing craft and making through the videos of others, that virtual experience of working with materials, making things, experiencing the world, I started to question, if I can get the same satisfaction, can I get the same satisfaction out of watching and experiencing something virtually as going into the studio and doing something myself? If what it is that we're doing as makers is producing objects, but also producing experiences for ourselves, what does it mean if we can have things produced, art being produced by robots, and we can still get the experience that we are making things through watching things being made? The satisfaction of seeing someone else do something well, is that truly the same as making it ourselves? So that's one of the big questions I'm struggling with right now. So this idea of something being a false front, or something being made to present more than it actually is something that I have been puzzling through for the last 10 or more years. Part of the reason why I got into jewelry and metalsmithing, I think, was through a fascination with value, real value, false value, the value of materials and how that value is established. This idea of how valuable something is kind of gives me these lenses on the world that pop up in strange ways in unusual places. So this is an image I took recently walking through the grocery store. There were these huge collections of flowers that had started to die. They had been, deeply discounted, but they had also been sprayed in gold and silver. And so the idea that a flower would be amped up in value by being covered with gold or silver spray paint is, I think, good representation of this question that I experience as I move through the world and look at materials and experience material information and visual information. The communication of value, is value inherent to the object itself, or is it something that we cover things with, that we place on top of objects and ideas? One of the ways in which I started thinking deeply about this after my undergrad experience was when I went to work in the jewelry industry. Part of the work that we would do in the store that I was working in is we would take in old gold. People would come to us with piles of material that they would want us to recycle and turn into new objects, new things. And occasionally the piece that they would offer us would have so little actual material weight and such a high degree of craft or labor value in it, that the piece itself, its worth in gold, would be negligible. But the amount of craft and labor that you would be destroying if you melted that thing down would never be able to be replicated. So this idea that value is something that can live in a material, but it's also something that can have a disproportionate relationship with the labor that was required in order to produce that particular object, is something that started to increasingly for me grow out of this experience of working with incoming objects that people would want to be recycled for their material value, rather than continue to experience them as they are, as they were for their craft value or labor value. Okay, I think before I spend a little bit of time talking about this next series of images of work that I've done, it's important to talk a little bit about my background. And so for my family today, you get to see a couple images, cute little images of yourself as well. I come from a family of people who make things. So this idea of labor and labor value is something that I grew up with. I had my, sort of school education, and my school education was very much influenced by my home education, the education that I inherited from my family and my community, the people that I worked with and played with. A lot of them made things. And so this was something that, we were always taking materials and old stuff and making new things with it. So that idea of labor, even though it came back and continued to recur later as I was learning and working, it's something that I inherited from a young age. This is another image of my wild family, and just to say a note of appreciation, there's a huge amount of people in my family that are working artists. So this is something that that I feel like I really benefited from, is looking and learning from my aunts and uncles and parents and older cousins. It was, being a working artist is difficult. It is really hard, but it is not something that was seen as being impossible in my family. So all the people who in my family who went before and worked as artists and continue to work as artists or work in creative jobs, that is something also that deeply influenced my concept of how creative labor has value. So these at-home learning experiences were paired with all the schools that I attended growing up. So I went to Franklin High School in Rainier Valley, studied at the University of Washington, and then ended up, after working in the jewelry industry for several years, ended up at Cranbrook Academy of Art. I think, so there's the family learning about labor, the school learning about labor, and then the job world learning about labor. In thinking through all of the different jobs that I've done, this is just kind of a selection, making burritos, working at shoe stores, packing boxes. At one point I trained to be a phlebotomist. I got to work in a library when I was in grad school. That was amazing. I have helped out with curatorial projects throughout my artwork. Crane Jewelers is the jewelry store where I got to experience that recycling of metal, and also incredible custom projects that would be produced by Kevin Crane and other jewelers through Crane Jewelers. And then I did bench work as well. So all of these different experiences of work and relationship to work have really influenced the way that I think about how we produce things and the work that we put into objects going forward. One of the major things that, along with this idea of constantly recycling materials and an appreciation for old craft, deep craft, one of the most important things that I heard while I was working at Crane Jewelers was this idea that it will grow back. And just as a little note of explanation, this is related to a conversation that I was having with Kevin Crane, the owner of the store and my employer, about how I was struggling to get back into the studio and make things, because I was having a moment where I didn't feel all that creative. And his response to me was, it will grow back. The wish to make things, the need to get your hands back on materials, ideas, they'll all grow back. So you just have to be patient, and it will grow back. All right, so I'm gonna go quickly through a couple of projects that very specifically have to do with labor and pieces that I've made. This is an image of an airplane meal that I had during grad school. I was flying back and forth. And from that meal, I started to take the little plastic containers that they were giving out on the plane, and I started turning them into pieces of adornment. So this is one neck piece that I produced using some of the airline containers. I was fascinated with this idea that there was this single, what was created as a single use container to have in this very restricted environment, flying on an airplane, that there was this one particular unit of food that you would eat in this particular way, and then it would stack and be disposed in a particular way, and everything was very prescribed in order to fit into this particular experience. This idea of things being made in order to create an experience that was incredibly useful and also very prescribed was coming out of research that I was doing, looking into the wearable objects that the early astronauts in the Apollo program were wearing. So in this image, you'll see a series of mirrors that were being strapped to the exterior of the astronaut suit. These mirrors were being used for the astronaut to look at switches and see things behind them in order to control the area that was around them, in order to control the spaceship. This idea that there would be something that could be incredibly useful and necessary and wearable was also connecting to things that I was looking into that had to do with wearable tools that were also regulating the way in which people's bodies were behaving. So objects like fitness trackers, or trackers that are being worn in manufacturing environments. And all of this was coming back to this idea of the wearable tool, or the object, or the piece that mediates the experience that you're having in your environment in a controlled way, was coming back into experiences, influencing experiences that I was having prior to my experience at grad school and after my experience at grad school. After I graduated, I worked for a company called Material Good. It was a production ceramics company, and we would produce, like hundreds of vases every single day. And that idea of an object that would allow you to, that would enhance your productivity, that would allow you to see in ways or move in ways that you wouldn't otherwise be able to, was connecting to a lot of the ideas that had been stewing in my head about labor, wearable objects, and how jewelry sort of has a relationship to our bodies, and also the labor of our bodies, the movement of our bodies, and the original movements of the maker of the piece. So a couple of other jobs that I did that also had to do with production. Because of time, I'm gonna move through some of these more quickly so that we have just a couple minutes for questions. These are images of things where I was replicating or reproducing the labor of something that had already been created. So in this case, a box that had already been created, and then I reproduced and replicated it in brass. The creation of a net, like plastic nets that you would see in the hardware store, which I recreated and replicated using fused fine silver wire that I then stretched across a room. The recreation of these geometric balls. I created them out of mesh in this case, and out of paper and liquid silver slip in this case. In these cases, it was a little bit more about repetitive form. Lots of bending, lots of folding. And then some pieces created out of pre-made industrial forms. This is the strip that goes on the baseboard of underneath a door. Okay, and finally, I think I'll end here in a way that hopefully will connect back to that first video. So the question that I've been asking myself, the thing that I've been pondering with that video work and the experience of continuing to make things like these shelves holding fruit. The question or the sort of problem that I've been experiencing with making things versus experiencing them virtually is whether or not we can experience the same level of satisfaction through experiencing things virtually versus experiencing things in real life. This set of shelves or wall objects presenting fruit came out of a series of work that I was doing where I would set up these screen-shaped brass shelves in exhibitions, and the fruit would be delivered and presented in a gallery, but the fruit would be delivered by Amazon Fresh or like another virtual fruit delivery service. And so it was this idea, I suppose, that you could go and get a piece of fruit from the gallery, but it would never be a piece of fruit that you would actually have been able to select yourself. The selection would have been done through this virtual and highly removed process, someone would have selected the fruit for you, but it would not have been you. Can you be satisfied in the same way if you had been able to choose that fruit? So with that, and with just a few minutes left, I think I'll say that in the same way that I want to choose and experience my own mango, my own apple, my own carrot, I think that we need to be in the studio, in the world, and experiencing things with our own hands in order to get what we want out of our studio experiences and our experience of making. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Julia. Yay. That last, I always have to interject my own question to begin with, but I don't want to take away from things. But the last thing that you said sort of struck me because of the way that I read a lot, and I feel like I have the experiences that these people have written about. And so I just wonder how that kind of fits into what you're saying about this whole thing. Although, I also need to touch things as well.
Thanks. That's a really good observation. I think when I see people now, when I see people making things, I still I get an immense amount of joy watching them because I am also making discoveries, but the feeling is the greatest when or my feeling of connection is the greatest when I have had, like you say, a certain level of common experience or perceived common experience with the person. So when I'm watching videos of people making things, my sense of discovery and connection is greater when I feel like I've had common experience. And then my learning through watching the video is also greater because I can feel what it is that they're doing because I've done it in real life.
Thank you. Thank you for that. There are a lot of really great mentions and things, not really any specific questions, but a lot of support for like Paul talked about the echoing of the studio and the life and all of that back and forth for that. Karen wrote, I appreciate this thinking about what makes something valuable. Is value intrinsic or does it come from adding to the thing? And with this, I appreciate how you're consistently reminding us how labor is key to value. And a gold piece is valuable not just for the gold, but for the labor and all that stuff. So thank you. Are there people who have questions that would like to say something live? I know we don't really have much time because Julia has to go and teach. Oh, someone asks, why do you think people are so drawn to jewelry?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Laura, for asking that question. It's not dumb. And even though I didn't use the word jewelry a lot in this presentation, I think that it is something that is running through everything that I make. The idea that someone made something that you can carry with you, I think is part of what makes jewelry so incredibly attractive. It's, I think, ultimately about relationship. It is, of course, always about value, but some of the pieces that I've heard people talk about loving the most, some of the pieces are not inherently valuable. They're not made out of something valuable. So we can talk about things like portable wealth and people being drawn to the material because it's beautiful and durable and valuable. But I think ultimately it comes down to being about relationship to the maker, and relationship between yourself and the other people in your life that have shared that piece of jewelry.
Wonderful. Are there any other thoughts before we zoom out? And I'll wait for a minute, but I really want to thank you for what a nice and sort of meandering through the crevices of your brain that we got to do in this experience. Like, it just was so wonderful to experience that. Thank you.
Thank you all.